Hey everyone, thank you very much for joining us. On behalf of the consulting team here, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present our findings and recommendations. Together, we've explored how Nexus can navigate its current challenges with workplace culture, flexible work arrangements, return to work policies, and also engagement with your employees. Let's get into it and meet the team. Going first today, we've got Sean, our employee behaviour advisor. Next, it'll be Gloria, our organisational psychologist. Following, it'll be Stephen, our specialist in employer brand and EVP. After that, it's Brian, our workplace design expert. And finally, myself, Michael, our leadership and ethics specialist. I'll now hand over to Sean to get things going.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. So everyone, just to recap, my name is Sean. I'm the behavioural analyst of the team here. Before I begin, I kind of want to just give a quick recap to everyone on the situation that we find ourselves in. So we've established pre-COVID at Nexus were industry leading in regards to their hybrid approach that they had for their employees. This attracted really top talent, allowed them to create a brand identity for themselves. Now, obviously, COVID happened. There was a broad push for work from home. And post-COVID, you have seen that there's been an increased frequency of employees working from home. And this has left the office quite empty. So as a result, there's been a diminished workplace community. And there's been a real limit to the amount of informal learning between colleagues from in person to person. We've established that previous attempts to encourage people back to the office have failed. And this is all kind of within a broader industry-wide push to get everyone back in person into the office. And we've also established a blanket mandate would contradict your company's values. So from a behavioral point of view, the whole work from home versus in the office debate ultimately boils down to a dilemma between two psychological needs. Okay, the first one of those needs is belonging. So the belonging really is the feeling of being accepted and supported within a group, and that's supported by social role theory, which we'll get to. And also the need for autonomy. So autonomy reflects a person's ability to think for themselves, to do things for themselves without being influenced by other people. And that will be covered by self-determination theory. So now, the basis of social role theory is that we as humans, we tend to categorize ourselves into what we call social identity groups. So these groups can be from any background. We're talking from the gym, from your hobbies. Friends and family are also a social identity group. But the one that we want to focus on here is that work can also be a social identity group. Okay? Being part of one of these groups can lead to a sense of belonging, identity, purpose, and also self-esteem improvements, which is great. And the aim would be to kind of create a social identity group within the workplace. Okay, this would allow for networking between people, integration, and socializing. You can argue that consistent office attendance, consistently getting in person with people, would help contribute to the creation of the social identity groups. Now, the other theory that we discussed was self-determination theory. Okay, the basis of this theory is that people are more determined and more motivated when their needs for autonomy are fulfilled. Okay, it's based on three pillars: one for autonomy, one for relatedness, and one for competence. Okay, the theory also does drive home that people are more motivated by what we call intrinsic motivators rather than extrinsic motivators. Okay, so an example of this is I personally find it easier to get up early in the morning to meet my friends for a coffee than I am to get up at the same time during the week to go to work. Okay, because I'm intrinsically motivated to meet my friends, whereas I'm extrinsically motivated to go to work. Okay, so intrinsically would be your passions, whereas an extrinsic motivator would be money for going to work. And the takeaway from this is you should try to strive to make an environment that makes people want to come to work, that makes them intrinsically motivated to come into the office. Now, so moving forward, okay, we've explained that previously you have absolutely excelled in autonomy, and we're promoting autonomy with the remote flexibility that you have offered. However, you've really neglected the relatedness and competence pillars of self-determination theory. This is through the lack of social connection between employees and the lack of onboarding and mentoring between one another. And there's been kind of an evidence shift between employees going from a a group of employees to more individualized role due to this weak shared identity. We're going to argue that work from home allows for greater autonomy at the cost of a sense of belonging, whereas being in the office promotes belonging at the cost of autonomy. Okay, so moving forward, employees should be made feel that they want to come into the office. Okay, to do so, possibly a more rigid hybrid approach may strike a balance between autonomy and belonging. Okay, it would encourage participation in the office. It would accommodate the needs of the employees while also retaining your reputation. And obviously, this can be done on a case-by-case basis. If there are some employees that require greater autonomy, perhaps with more needs that they have, this can be dealt with. Okay, I'm now going to pass you over to Gloria.
Right. Thank you for that, Sean. So my role today as an organizational psychologist is to take you a layer deeper to explore the human side of this issue. We're going to look at the why behind the behavior that you're seeing. So the first and most important thing to understand is what you're observing in your offices is not an act of opposition. Your employees are not actively resisting the office. They are simply following powerful habits that have been formed over the last few years. This new routine is reinforced every single day by two of the strongest drivers of human behavior, convenience and comfort. The home office has become the easy, predictable path. We are all creatures of habit, and we will naturally follow the path of least resistance. This brings me to the image on the slide. The behavior that you see, the empty desks, is just the tip of the iceberg. The real drivers are the powerful invisible forces beneath the surface. The habits, the unconscious preferences, the psychology. This is exactly why rigid rules often fail. They try to fight established patterns with force, addressing only the tip of the iceberg while ignoring the massive foundation underneath. To create real lasting change, we need to understand the psychology that drives the choice. So how do we look beneath the surface? For that, we can turn to a powerful framework from social psychologist Echek Eisen called the theory of planned behavior. This theory is brilliant because it is simple. It helps us diagnose why people make the choices they do by breaking it down into three parts. When the employees consider coming to the office, they are subconsciously asking themselves three questions. First, attitude. They ask, is this going to be a valuable use of my time, or is it just a hassle? So right now, the attitude is often negative. The effort of the commute feels like a cost with unclear benefits. Second, subjective norms. They look around and ask, what is everyone else on my team doing? When their manager and their colleagues are all online, the social custom, the unwritten rule is to stay home. And finally, perceived behavioral control. They ask, honestly, how difficult is this going to be for me? With long commutes or family logistics, coming in can feel genuinely hard. So when the answers to these three questions are no, stay home, and it's too hard, the decision to stay remote becomes almost automatic. So, if the problem is psychological, our solution needs to be psychological too. This brings us to our solution framework, nudge theory, which was developed by Nobel laureate Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. So the core idea here is to stop pushing and start guiding. Our approach is to be a guide, not a governor. A nudge involving small, subtle changes to the environment is what they call choice environment. To make the right choice feel like the most natural choice. It's about ensuring that employees always feel respected and in control. So for Nexus, our strategy is to use these targeted nudges to reframe the office as a truly compelling choice. So what does this look like in practice? Here we have 3 evidence-based nudges that we recommend. So first, we leverage social proof. Instead of a top-down directive, let the social energy of your teams pull people in. By doing this, the office becomes the center of gravity for important work. This uses what psychologists call descriptive social norms, showing what peers are doing. which Kubera's research confirms is highly effective because we naturally want to be where the action is. Second, we implement in-office by default scheduling. So right now, coming to the office is an opt-in decision that requires effort. We can flip that for key collaborative moments. For example, when you schedule the weekly team sync, make in-office the default setting in the calendar with an easy option to join remotely if needed. As Kubera notes, defaults are incredibly effective where there is uncertainty, as they are often seen as the recommended course of action. And finally, we reframe the value proposition. This is about changing the story. Instead of making attendance feel like a form of surveillance, we frame it as an investment. Your communication should focus on what employees gain. It answers that crucial question: what's in it for me? So to bring this all together, the diagnosis using the theory of planned behavior shows us that the attendance issue isn't just random. It's a predictable result of 3 psychological barriers: negative attitudes, remote first social customs, and low perceived control. The solution using nudge theory is to use targeted, respectful nudges to positively influence these barriers without resorting to top-down enforcement. And the third key takeaway is this: the most effective path forward for Nexus is to shift from policy enforcement to psychological engagement. Now that we understand the why behind the behavior, we need to design the what, the compelling brand narrative and the physical office experience that will make people want to make that choice. For that, I'll hand it over to Stephen.
Thanks, Gloria. Okay. I've been looking into Nexus Enterprise, this big tech company known for letting employees work whenever and wherever they want. It's been a thing for 10 years, and it's why people like caregivers or those with disability joined. They love the freedom to manage their lives, but now Nexus want more in-person time to boost things like mentorship, where junior engineers learn from seniors, or innovation. Like when team brainstorm cool ideas together, the problems, employees feel like this shift to office time breaks the promise of total flexibility. It's like they sign up for one thing, and now it's changing. I found this example where Google tried mandating 3 office days in 2021. Some employees pushed back because it feels like company was going back on its words. Also, Gallup's 2022 report says 60% of hybrid workers care more about flexibility than rigid schedules. If Nexus isn't careful, employees might feel betrayed, get disengaged, or even leave. So how do you fix this without messing up what makes Nexus special? I dug into some theories to understand this better. First, there's organizational identity theory by Albert, and within 1985, it says a company identity is its core traits, like Nexus being all about flexibility and trust. If you change that too fast, like forcing everyone into the office, it can cause an identity crisis, where an employee feels lost about what the company stands for. I read about IBM in the 1990s. They shift from making hardware surface, but kept identity as innovation company by explaining it clearly to employees. Nexus could learn from that. Then there's psychological contract theory by Rossiu. This is about the unspoken deal between a company and its employees. Like Nexus promising freedom if you do good work. If you break that deal, people get upset. Rossiu's 1998 study shows a tech company that forced fixed schedule lost 15% in employee engagement because workers felt betrayed. Nexus risks the same if it doesn't handle the shift carefully. We need to keep employees on board. So, how can Nexus move forward? I think we should shift the EVP to flexibility with purpose. It keeps the spirit of freedom but adds reasons for coming to the office. Here's what I suggest. Tell a news story. Show why in-person time matters. For example, it helps mentorship, like when a senior engineer helps a newbie solve a tough coding problems, or innovation. Nexus had the 2023 hackathon where a team came up to a patient in person. It also helps career growth, like getting noticed by leaders or promotions. This ties to Nexus missions to innovate. Be open and inclusive. Don't just announce a new policy. Talk to employees about it. Use town halls, blogs, or forums to explain why in-person time helps. Let employees help design the schedules, like picking 2 core office days but keeping remote options. Microsoft did this in 2021, letting teams set their own hybrid rules, and it cuts down the complaints because people felt heard. Build trust. Share real examples. like how Nexus products team in-person workshop leads to a game-changing app. Show employees the new model works. McKinsey's 2023 says companies with clear hybrid policies keeps 20% more employees. Start a pilot by Q4 2025 to test this, like trying out schedules in few teams and tweaking based on feedbacks. That way, employees sees Nexus still cares about them. So, here's what I've learned. Nexus flexibility is awesome, but it needs to change a bit to help with the collaboration and innovation. By moving to flexibility with purpose, Nexus can keep the cool vibe while meeting new goals. Be super open, like explaining the why and involving employees. Stop them from feeling betrayed. Theories like organizational identity and psychological contract shows us why this matters. I think piloting hybrid schedules by Q4 2025 is the way to go. So Nexus stays a leader in modern work. The next part will be Brian explaining why people can't returning to the office due to a lack of compelling reasons and forced mandates without long-term values.
Thank you, Stephen. Hi, everyone. I will talk about the design of engaging employees into office without any mandates. Let me start with this. The issue is not that the employees are refusing to return in objection. It's just because the office doesn't offer enough value for them anymore. Compulsion doesn't work because the employees feel they are being forced. And as Knowles points out, when return to office policies lack support, employees can feel frustrated or even resentful. So instead of forcing them to be back on control, we should focus on creating reasons the people want to return. So we recommend 3 design strategies to bring people back without any mandates. And this is backed by the Williamson et al., which found that the return to office mandates often create dissatisfaction when they ignore the individual circumstances. Firstly, design for emotion, which means making the office time feel special. Second, design for purpose, which means the office should support the causes that can bring everyone back to the office and cannot easily be done at home. And lastly, the third one is design for equity, which means that if employees face any obstacles which prevent them from coming in, we need to support them. Okay, let me further explain these 3 decisions. The first strategy is to make office time emotionally rewarding. According to affective effects theory, people's workplace behavior is shaped by a lot of small or emotional experiences. If nothing special or memorable happens in the office, why do the employees need to leave their home and to come back to the office? So we suggest creating the emotional attractions, such as the Innovation Thursdays, which are very fun, creative sessions to bring the energy across all the teams. We also run some special activities like the welcome breakfasts or team appreciation walls or even the festival or monthly birthday celebrations. All of these moments can create a connection and also put everyone together. The second strategy is to design the office around with the high-value tasks. The job characteristics theory shows that the people are more engaged when their work is meaningful and allows them to contribute in different ways. So the office should support the collaboration, problem solving, or even the mentorship, but not just sitting at their desks. That's why we suggest making the office like a studio, which is a place for the mentoring, for design, or even creating the things that let them to be together. And setting up the mentorship program for early career staff can make them feel more involved into the company. So also we should recognize the employees who make the valuable in-person contributions, but not just those who aim to fulfill the attendance. Lastly, the third one is we must make the returning to the office possible for everyone. Quite a number of literature support that we should help the employees to remove any difficulties when returning to the office. Williamson et al. Found that the return to office mandates often backfire, especially when they ignore the people's individual needs. Knowles also says that the human resources department should also take lead on supporting all the employees, but not pressuring them and asking them to back to the office. And Srivastava et al. Also found that while many people feel more comfortable working from home, maybe because of the better lighting or air quality or even the noise control, I think this is exactly why the office needs to improve. If the home environment is more appealing, I think the office must do better by offering a greater physical experience. So we suggest offering help like the travel vouchers or childcare support. And we also need to make the office experience better with something like the quiet zones or any flexible working days. These changes would definitely make the returning feel fair and also feasible. To wrap up, I think we should not manage the attendance. I think we should design for the participation. Where the office feels good, supports real work, and is accessible to everyone, people will definitely show up. It's not about forcing them to lag. It's about giving them a good reason to come in. And I'll pass the floor to Michael to talk about the leadership and so the ethics. Over to you, Michael.
That's excellent stuff, Brian. Thank you very much. Team, today I'll be discussing ethics, equity, and the role of leadership. Let's start with a simple truth. People don't follow policies, they follow people. And there's quite a bit of evidence that proves this. Brevard and Zacher explored this through the lens of leadership theory. They teach us that involved or visible leadership leads to boosted performance, trust, and engagement. On the other side of the coin, well, avoidant or passive leadership leads to a breakdown of morale and culture. This is what we call transformational leadership versus laissez-faire. How does this relate to our situation? Well, if your leaders aren't showing up to work, employees won't either. It's not based on defiance, it's based on mirroring. Just ask Starbucks. After announcing a return to work office push, the leadership was notably absent. The CEO commuted by private jet, whilst other workers were told to be part of the team and not live remotely. That disconnect triggered employee backlash and seriously damaged trust. So if it's a culture of presence that we're seeking, we need leadership that's visibly present too. Now, let's talk about fairness, because people don't just notice what you do, they compare it. Equity theory explains the reasoning behind this and tells us that employees judge fairness by comparing what they put in versus what they get out. When someone sees others getting more for less, that's when things such as disengagement, frustration, or even quiet quitting starts creeping in. Yes, it is a thing. So if execs are remote while teams are expected back in the office, well, that imbalance is just hard to ignore. Again, this is not just theoretical. At Amazon, internal surveys revealed that 91% of professionals were unhappy with new return to work policies. 73% considered looking for jobs elsewhere. Why? Well, the rollout felt uneven, and people didn't feel heard. Ethical leadership isn't just about setting rules. It's about considering who those rules affect. So how do we get around this, even when the news isn't what people want? As shown in procedural justice theory, people care just as much about how a decision is made as what the decision actually is. When you explain the why, when you invite input, and when the process is consistent, that's where trust lives. Even tough policies can land well if they're rolled out transparently. Again, we have a real example of this happening. Apple really skipped the memo on this theory, and when they announced their return to work office mandates without warning or rationale, employees revolted. Petitions were filled, leaks occurred, and mass pushback followed. It's not just bad optics, it's a breakdown in culture. Good process doesn't guarantee agreement. We can agree on that, but it gives people something more valuable, respect. So what does all of this mean, and how can we action this? It starts with what leadership models. Culture can't be declared. It has to be demonstrated every day. That means leaders showing up for their employees, both physically and digitally, communicating decisions with clarity and adapting those decisions with empathy. Microsoft did this. Under CEO Satya Nadella's leadership, they introduced their model, coach, care framework. Managers were trained to live their values, adapt mentoring for hybrid teams, and also to prioritize inclusion. And the results of this? Surveys showed all-time high in employee inclusion and manager support, and productivity didn't dip at all. In other words, intentional leadership simply works. So where does that leave us? Well, trust, adaptability, and inclusivity built the foundations of Nexus. They're not just nice to haves. They're your strategic edge. But here's the catch. Culture only works if leadership actively carries it forward. Let's land with these three takeaways. Employees don't follow principles. They follow leadership. Culture isn't what you say, it's what you consistently do. And whatever policy path you choose, return to work, hybrid, or work from home, how you lead it will define whether it works or not. This shows us that effective leaders don't impose culture, they co-create it as a partnership through clarity, empathy, and trust. And that's what we believe will keep Nexus ahead, not just of the curve, but of your competition. In the following slides, we'll be showing all of the references and our findings if you're interested in them. Thank you very much.